Juniper Blackwood, 28, sat frozen at the dinner table as her father's words hung in the air. "No one in this family actually likes you." The room fell silent, except for her mother's quiet snickering. 10 years later, when the Blackwood empire crumbled and her parents begged for her help, Juniper smiled as she remembered that fateful night that changed everything, the night she decided her family would one day regret their cruelty. Hey everyone! Before I dive deeper into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this family revenge drama so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma comes back around in this family betrayal. Now let's get back to that devastating dinner. Growing up as the middle child in the prestigious Blackwood family had never been easy for Juniper. Her older brother Maxwell was the golden child Harvard Business School graduate and heir apparent to Blackwood Financial Advisors, the family firm that had made them millionaires. Her younger sister Violet was the baby of the family, coddled and protected, whose artistic talents were constantly celebrated despite her lack of ambition or direction. Then there was Juniper, eternally caught in the middle. Despite graduating summa cum laude from Columbia with dual degrees in finance and economics, her achievements were always minimized. "Anyone can get good grades if they have no social life," her mother, Eleanor, would say dismissively. The constant comparisons to Maxwell and the subtle digs at her personality had been the soundtrack of her childhood. The Blackwood family resided in a sprawling colonial mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, where appearances mattered above all else. Sunday family dinners were mandatory, no exceptions. These gatherings had always been battlegrounds of passive-aggressive comments and subtle power plays, but Juniper had learned to steel herself against them, hoping that one day her parents would see her worth. That particular Sunday in April started like any other. Juniper had driven up from her apartment in New York City, where she worked as a financial analyst at a competing firm. She had deliberately chosen not to join the family business, a decision her father Richard never let her forget. Working for the enemy, he would say, only half joking. The tension in the dining room was palpable that evening. Richard had been drinking more than usual, his face flushed with expensive scotch. Eleanor was particularly snippy, criticizing everything from Juniper's modest navy dress to her recent haircut. Maxwell sat smirking throughout dinner, occasionally throwing in a barbed comment about Juniper's little job. Violet, as usual, was lost in her phone, occasionally looking up to laugh at a joke made at Juniper's expense. So, Juniper Richard had started swirling his scotch. "I heard Davidson Financial is struggling with that new client portfolio." "Your team can't seem to handle the big leagues, huh?" Juniper took a measured sip of water. "Actually, Dad, we're doing quite well. The portfolio is up 12%. Since 12%, Maxwell interrupted with a snort. "We're hitting 20 with the Hendersons' account." Eleanor smiled proudly at her son. "That's because Maxwell has a natural talent for this business. It's in his blood." "And what's in my blood?" Mom Juniper had asked, quietly putting down her fork. The question hung in the air. Richard laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged dining room. Stubbornness, ingratitude, a complete lack of family loyalty. Juniper felt her chest tighten but maintained her composure. "I've been loyal to this family my entire life. I just wanted to build something of my own." "Something of your own," Eleanor repeated with a cold laugh. "Darling, you've always been trying so hard to stand out, but the truth is, you're just unremarkable." The casual cruelty of the statement hit Juniper like a physical blow. She looked around the table, hoping someone would defend her, but Maxwell was nodding in agreement, and Violet was suppressing a giggle. "You know," Richard said, leaning forward, his eyes glassy from alcohol, "we've been talking, your mother and I. And we've realized something." He paused dramatically. "No one in this family actually likes you. We tolerate you because you're a Blackwood, but honestly, these dinners would be much more pleasant without your constant presence." The room fell silent. Even Maxwell looked slightly uncomfortable with how far their father had gone. Eleanor, however, didn't correct her husband. Instead, she gave a small, dismissive shrug as if to say, "Well, he's not wrong." In that moment, something broke inside Juniper, but something else hardened. Years of emotional abuse crystallized into a single realization: these people weren't her family. Not in any way that mattered. They were simply individuals who shared her DNA and had used her as an emotional punching bag for 28 years. "I see," she said, quietly placing her napkin beside her half-eaten dinner. "Thank you for your honesty." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Eleanor sighed. "This is exactly what we mean. You've always been so sensitive." "Not anymore," Juniper replied, rising from her chair. She looked at each of them in turn, memorizing their expressions. Richard's drunken disdain, Eleanor's cold indifference, Maxwell's smug superiority, and Violet's vapid amusement. "I won't be coming to dinner next Sunday. Or any Sunday after that." "You'll be back," Richard scoffed. "Where else would you go? Who else would put up with you?" As Juniper walked toward the door, she heard her mother call after her. "Don't forget who paid for your education, Juniper. Everything you have you owe to this family." That night, as she drove back to her apartment in New York, tears streaming down her face, Juniper made a decision. She would show them exactly who she was by becoming someone they would one day desperately need. And when that day came, they would learn exactly what it felt like to be dismissed by someone they depended on. Little did the Blackwoods know their middle child had already been quietly observing the inner workings of the family business for years. She had noticed the inconsistencies in her father's accounting practices, her brother's reckless investment strategies, and the warning signs that Blackwood Financial was not as solid as everyone believed. What she was about to do would change all their lives forever, and set in motion a plan for the most satisfying revenge served ice cold, just like her family's hearts. Monday morning, after the devastating family dinner, Juniper arrived at her office at Davidson Financial with a new sense of purpose. Her usual meticulous appearance was intact, not a hair out of her sleek bob out of place, her charcoal suit perfectly pressed, but behind her composed facade, her mind was racing with possibilities. For the first time, she felt truly free from seeking her family's approval. Now she was playing a different game entirely. "You look different today," remarked her colleague and friend Olivia, placing a coffee on Juniper's desk. "Everything okay?" Juniper smiled, a genuine expression that hadn't crossed her face in weeks. "Better than okay. I've made a decision about my future." Over the next few weeks, Juniper initiated her carefully constructed plan. The first step was to secure her position at Davidson Financial. She had always been an exceptional employee, but now she worked with renewed vigor, coming in earlier, staying later, and taking on the most challenging accounts. Her boss, Thomas Davidson, a shrewd businessman in his 60s who had built his company from nothing, took notice. "Juniper, I'm impressed with the Langley portfolio," he said during their monthly review. "You've increased their returns by 15% when everyone else was losing ground in this market." "Thank you, sir," Juniper replied. "I've been developing a new investment strategy that I believe could work for several of our high-risk clients." Davidson leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell me more." This was the opening Juniper needed. Over the next hour, she outlined her innovative approach, one that combined traditional investment principles with emerging market opportunities that most firms, including her family's, were overlooking. "This is exceptional work," Blackwood Davidson said when she finished. "But I have to ask, why aren't you bringing these ideas to your father's firm?" Surely the prodigal daughter would be welcomed back with open arms. Juniper met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Davidson, I believe in loyalty to those who value my contributions. My future is here, if you'll have me." 2 days later, Juniper was promoted to senior investment strategist, a position that gave her access to Davidson's most elite clients and, more importantly, insider information about major market movements. The second phase of her plan involved gathering intelligence on Blackwood Financial's vulnerabilities. Though she no longer attended family dinners, Juniper maintained a cordial relationship with the firm's longtime administrative assistant Margaret, who had always been kind to her as a child. Over lunch at an upscale Manhattan restaurant, Margaret unwittingly revealed crucial information. "Your father's been taking some big risks lately," she confided. "The Henderson account that Maxwell's so proud of. It's heavily leveraged in these new tech startups. One market hiccup and..." She made a crashing sound. "That doesn't sound like Dad's usual strategy," Juniper remarked, keeping her tone casual. "It's not," Margaret sighed. "It's Maxwell's doing. Your father's been letting him take the lead more and more. Between us, I think Richard's drinking has gotten worse. He's not as sharp as he used to be." This was valuable information. Juniper knew that Maxwell, for all his bravado, had always been reckless. His success thus far had been more about timing and luck than skill. If he was making the major decisions now, Blackwood Financial was even more vulnerable than she'd thought. The third element of Juniper's plan was perhaps the most ambitious, creating her own safety net. Using her substantial savings and the bonus from her promotion, she began quietly investing in properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods across New York and Connecticut. She also established a private investment fund under a shell company name, inviting select clients who were dissatisfied with their current financial advisors to join. One such client was Harold Winters, a billionaire tech entrepreneur who had recently had a falling out with Richard Blackwood over investment strategies. "Your father thinks traditional markets are the only safe bet," Harold told Juniper during their initial meeting. "He laughed when I suggested diversifying into renewable energy." Juniper smiled. "Mr. Winters, I believe renewable energy is not just the future, it's the present. And those who position themselves correctly now will see returns that traditional investors can only dream of." By the end of their meeting, Harold had committed $20 million to Juniper's fund, with the promise of more if her predictions proved accurate. 6 months after the fateful dinner, Juniper had tripled her personal net worth, secured the loyalty of several key clients who had previously been with Blackwood Financial, and positioned herself to capitalize on her family's inevitable downfall. But there was one more piece to her puzzle. During a charity gala that both Davidson Financial and Blackwood Financial were sponsoring, Juniper encountered her younger sister Violet at the bar. Unlike their parents and Maxwell, Violet had always been more clueless than cruel, a follower rather than a leader in family dynamics. "Junie, I haven't seen you in forever," Violet exclaimed, already tipsy from champagne. "Mom keeps saying you're going through a phase." Juniper gave her sister a measured smile. "It's not a phase, Vi. It's a career and a life that I've chosen for myself." Violet pouted. "But you're missing so much. Dad's been super stressed, and Maxwell is always in meetings. No one has time for me anymore." She took another sip of champagne. "Plus, there's all this weird stuff happening with the company. I don't understand it, but everyone's acting strange." "What kind of weird stuff?" Juniper asked, careful to keep her tone merely curious rather than eager. Violet leaned in conspiratorially. "I overheard Dad and Maxwell arguing about some offshore accounts. Dad was furious, saying Max had gone too far. And there's this guy from the SEC who keeps calling the office. Margaret tries to keep it quiet, but I notice things. The Securities and Exchange Commission investigating Blackwood Financial. This was even better than Juniper had hoped. If her father and brother were involved in potentially illegal activities, their downfall might come even without her intervention. But Juniper wasn't leaving anything to chance. She had planted the seeds. Now she would nurture them until they grew into her family's complete destruction. As she bid goodnight to her oblivious sister, Juniper felt a cold satisfaction settling in her chest. The Blackwoods had spent years making her feel unwanted and unworthy. Soon they would learn exactly how much they had underestimated the daughter they never appreciated. 1 year after being told no one in her family liked her, Juniper Blackwood sat in her corner office at Davidson Financial, reviewing the quarterly reports with satisfaction. Her private investment fund, Phoenix Capital, named for the mythical bird that rises from ashes, a metaphor she found fitting, had outperformed all market projections. Harold Winters's initial investment had already yielded a 35% return, prompting him to not only increase his stake, but also to refer several of his wealthy associates. Meanwhile, Juniper had been strategically positioning herself as an industry thought leader. She published insightful articles in financial journals, gave keynote speeches at investment conferences, and even launched a podcast discussing emerging market trends. Each public appearance enhanced her credibility and expanded her network while subtly undermining the traditional approaches championed by firms like Blackwood Financial. The Blackwood article just went live. Olivia announced, walking into Juniper's office with 2 coffees. She handed one to Juniper and pulled up the financial news site on her tablet. The headline read, "Rising Star Juniper Blackwood Challenges Family Legacy with Innovative Investment Strategies." Juniper smiled as she scanned the article. It was exactly what she had hoped for. A piece that positioned her as the forward-thinking rebel who had broken away from her family's outdated methods to forge a more successful path. The journalist had done an excellent job contrasting her approach with Blackwood Financial's recent struggles, noting that several major clients had defected to Davidson Financial over the past year. "Your family must be fuming," Olivia remarked. "I imagine they are," Juniper replied calmly, though inwardly she felt a surge of vindication. She had deliberately avoided checking in on her family directly, preferring to let her success speak for itself. But through industry gossip and occasional updates from Margaret, she knew Blackwood Financial was facing significant challenges. That afternoon, Juniper received an unexpected call. The number displayed on her phone was her father's. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Juniper Blackwood speaking," she answered coolly. "Junie." Her father's voice sounded older, less assured than she remembered. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," she replied, keeping her tone neutral despite the rush of emotions his voice triggered. "Not over the phone. Dinner. Sunday. The usual time." It wasn't a request, but a command, as if the past year hadn't happened, as if she was still the obedient daughter who would jump at his summons. Juniper paused, savoring the moment. "I'm afraid I have prior commitments, Dad. I could possibly do lunch on Tuesday." The silence on the other end was telling. Richard Blackwood wasn't accustomed to being denied, especially by his children. "Fine," he finally said. "Tuesday. The Capitol Grill. Noon." "I'll have my assistant confirm," Juniper replied, deliberately professional. "Is there anything specific you'd like to discuss? I like to be prepared for my meetings." Another pause. "Family business, Juniper. Just be there." The line went dead. Juniper placed her phone down slowly, a small smile playing at her lips. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the first sign that the mighty Blackwoods were beginning to crack. Tuesday arrived, and Juniper entered the Capitol Grill precisely at noon, dressed in a striking red power suit that she knew would irritate her color-conservative father. Richard was already seated nursing what appeared to be water rather than his usual scotch. He looked markedly older, the lines around his eyes deeper, his once commanding presence diminished. "You look well," he said, as she sat down, his tone suggesting surprise. "Success agrees with me," Juniper replied smoothly. "You wanted to talk about family business." Richard shifted, uncomfortably. "Your article has caused quite a stir." Several clients have called asking why we aren't adopting similar strategies to what you're implementing at Davidson. And what did you tell them? That Blackwood Financial has a proven track record of stability and that flash-in-the-pan approaches might yield short-term gains, but lack longevity. He took a sip of water. But that's not why I asked to meet. I didn't think it was Juniper, said, maintaining eye contact. Richard leaned forward. The SEC is conducting an audit of our books. Maxwell made some questionable decisions regarding our offshore holdings. Nothing illegal, he hastened to add, but potentially problematic from a regulatory perspective. And this concerns me, how Juniper asked, though she knew exactly where this was heading. We need someone with clean hands to take over certain accounts temporarily. Someone with the Blackwood name but not directly connected to the current management. Juniper laughed, a genuine sound of disbelief. You want me to risk my reputation and career to bail out Maxwell's mistakes? I'm asking you to help your family, Richard replied, a hint of his old authority returning to his voice. Despite everything, you're still a Blackwood. Juniper leaned back, studying her father. You told me that no one in the family actually likes me, that you merely tolerate me because of our shared name. Why would I help people who've made it clear they don't value me as a person? Richard had the decency to look uncomfortable. Things are said in the heat of the moment, Juniper. We've always been a passionate family. No, Dad. Cruel things are said when people show their true selves. She stood up. I won't be helping Blackwood Financial. In fact, I've just acquired a significant position in your largest competitor through my private fund. You might want to prepare your clients for another round of disappointing quarterly results. As she turned to leave, Richard called after her. You would destroy your own family out of spite. Juniper paused, looking back at her father with a level gaze. I'm not destroying anything, Dad. I'm simply allowing you to experience the consequences of your own actions and Maxwell's poor decisions. Isn't that what you always taught us about responsibility? As she walked away, Juniper felt lighter than she had in years. The revenge she had meticulously planned was unfolding perfectly, but more importantly, she had finally stood up to the man who had belittled her all her life. The Blackwood Empire was beginning to crumble, and Juniper was not only watching from a safe distance, she was helping to dismantle it one strategic move at a time. 3 months after her confrontation with Richard, Juniper received an urgent text from Violet Blackwood Financial, raided by FBI, Dad and Max in custody. Mom, hysterical. Please call. Juniper stared at the message, her heart racing despite her outward calm. She had expected Blackwood Financial to face regulatory issues, but an FBI raid suggested something far more serious than the investment irregularities she had been aware of. Had her actions somehow escalated the situation beyond what she had intended? Before she could process this, her office phone rang. It was Thomas Davidson. Juniper, are you seeing the news? He asked, without preamble. She quickly pulled up a financial news site on her computer. The headline blared, Blackwood Financial under federal investigation for fraud and money laundering. CEO Richard Blackwood and COO Maxwell Blackwood taken into custody. I'm seeing it now, she replied, her voice steady despite the shock. What does this mean for us? That's why I'm calling, Davidson said. Several of Blackwood's major clients are already reaching out to us. They're panicking, looking to move their assets immediately. I need you to handle this, personally. These are relationships you uniquely understand. Over the next 48 hours, Juniper worked almost non-stop fielding calls from terrified clients of Blackwood Financial and assuring them that their assets would be safe under Davidson's management. With each conversation, she learned more details about the extent of her father and brother's deception. Apparently, Maxwell had been falsifying returns on major accounts for years, using new client funds to pay existing clients, a classic Ponzi scheme. Richard had either been complicit or willfully ignorant, signing off on fraudulent statements and helping to conceal the truth from investors. The scheme had begun to unravel when several large clients, influenced by Juniper's rising star and the contrasting reports of Blackwood's conservative returns, had demanded to withdraw substantial portions of their investments. Simultaneously, on the third day, as Juniper was finalizing the transfer of the Henderson account, one of Blackwood's largest, her assistant, announced an unexpected visitor. "Your mother is here to see you," she said, looking uncomfortable. "She's quite insistent." Juniper took a deep breath. "Send her in." Eleanor Blackwood entered the office like a storm, her usual perfect appearance noticeably disheveled. Her designer suit was wrinkled, her makeup hastily applied, and the hands that clutched her luxury handbag were trembling slightly. "What have you done?" she demanded without preamble. Juniper gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Have a seat, Mom." "I will not sit. Your father and brother are in jail because of you. They're in jail because they committed fraud." Juniper corrected calmly. "Their actions have nothing to do with me." Eleanor laughed bitterly. "Don't play innocent, Juniper. We know you've been poaching our clients for months. You deliberately destabilized the firm until Maxwell had no choice but to take drastic measures." Juniper raised an eyebrow. "So you're admitting that Maxwell was running a Ponzi scheme. I'm saying he was trying to save the family business while you were actively trying to destroy it." Eleanor's voice broke. "How could you do this to us? We're your family, are we?" Juniper asked quietly. "You made it very clear that night at dinner that I was merely tolerated, not loved. Not even liked." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "That was just Richard talking. He'd had too much to drink. You know how he gets. And yet you didn't defend me. None of you did." Juniper stood her height advantage, allowing her to look down at her mother. "For years I tried to earn your approval, your affection. I excelled academically. I built a successful career. I conducted myself with integrity, and none of it was ever good enough. So this is your revenge, destroying everything we've built. No, Mother. This is me succeeding, despite you, not to spite you. I didn't cause Blackwood Financial's downfall. I simply refused to sacrifice my career to save it." She paused, studying her mother's desperate expression. "Why are you really here?" Eleanor seemed to deflate slightly. "We need money for the lawyers. Good ones. The kind that can make this go away." Juniper laughed in disbelief. "You're asking me to fund Dad and Maxwell's legal defense after everything? You're the only one with access to liquid assets now. The feds have frozen all our accounts. They've seized the house. Violet and I are staying in a hotel." Eleanor's voice was a mixture of outrage and pleading. "We're talking about your father and brother spending decades in prison, Juniper." For a brief moment, Juniper felt a flicker of sympathy. Despite everything, these were the people who had raised her, whose DNA she shared. But then she remembered all the dinners where she'd been belittled, all the achievements that had been dismissed, all the times she'd been made to feel less than simply for being herself. "I'll tell you what, Mom," Juniper said slowly. "I won't fund their defense. What they did was wrong, and they need to face the consequences. But I will help you and Violet." Eleanor's eyes widened with hope. "On one condition," Juniper continued. "You acknowledge right here and now that the way you all treated me was wrong, that I deserved better from my family." Eleanor stared at her daughter, conflict evident in her expression. Pride warred with desperation, her ingrained sense of superiority battling with the reality of her current circumstances. "We may have been hard on you." She finally said the words, clearly difficult for her to articulate. "Not good enough," Juniper replied, her voice firm. "I want an apology. A real one." Eleanor's face hardened. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing us brought low, having power over us? I'm not enjoying your suffering, Mom. But I am done accepting less than I deserve. Juniper sat back down at her desk. The offer stands. A genuine apology, and I'll help you and Violet find a place to live, get back on your feet. No legal fees for Dad and Maxwell, though. That's non-negotiable. After a long moment, Eleanor's shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine. I'm sorry for how we treated you. You didn't deserve it. The words were stilted, forced, but they were a start. Juniper nodded. I'll have my assistant help you find a rental apartment. I'll cover 6 months' rent. After that, you'll need to figure things out. 6 months. Eleanor looked aghast. What am I supposed to do after that? I've never worked a day in my life. Then I suggest you start learning, Juniper replied. Consider it a growth opportunity. As her mother left the office, visibly shaken by this new power dynamic, Juniper felt a strange mixture of emotions. The revenge she had planned had escalated beyond what she had initially envisioned, with consequences more severe than she had anticipated. Yet there was also a sense of closure beginning to form. For the first time, Eleanor had been forced to acknowledge the family's mistreatment of her, to see Juniper not as the disappointing middle child, but as a successful woman who held power of her own. I know we're at a turning point in this family drama, and I can see you're totally invested in finding out what happens to the Blackwood family. Will Juniper's revenge bring her the satisfaction she seeks? Before we continue with the dramatic fallout, I'd love to know what you would do in her situation. Would you help your family after such betrayal, or let karma run its course? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Hit that like button if you're enjoying the story, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this family vengeance unfolds. Now let's see how Juniper handles the growing consequences of her revenge. The media frenzy surrounding the Blackwood financial scandal grew exponentially in the weeks following Richard and Maxwell's arrest. Financial news outlets ran special reports on the Blackwood betrayal, detailing how one of the most respected firms in the industry had been operating as a sophisticated fraud for years. Business magazines published lengthy features analyzing the fall of the Blackwood empire, complete with family photos and timelines of their rise and spectacular downfall. Juniper had expected to feel vindicated by these developments. Instead, she found herself increasingly uncomfortable with the public spectacle. While she had wanted her family to face consequences for their actions both toward her personally and their professional misconduct, she hadn't anticipated becoming collateral damage in the court of public opinion. Miss Blackwood, do you have any comment on your father and brother's arraignment tomorrow? A reporter called out as Juniper left her office building one evening. Did you know about the fraud before you left? Blackwood Financial shouted another. Are you cooperating with federal prosecutors? Juniper hurried to her waiting car, ignoring the barrage of questions. Her driver quickly pulled away from the curb, leaving the journalists behind. This is getting out of hand, she muttered, checking her phone to find 17 missed calls, most from unknown numbers. At Davidson Financial, the situation was equally complicated. While Thomas Davidson had initially capitalized on the Blackwood scandal to attract their former clients, he was now growing concerned about the association with the Blackwood name. The board is worried about perception, he told Juniper during a private meeting in his office. While you've been instrumental in stabilizing these client relationships, there are questions about whether your continued high-profile role might eventually become problematic. Juniper felt a chill at his words. You're considering pushing me out, Davidson looked uncomfortable. Not pushing you out, no, but perhaps a temporary step back from client-facing roles while this all settles down. A sabbatical may be paid, of course. I've done nothing wrong, Juniper said firmly. In fact, I was the one who refused to participate in my family's business practices. That should count for something. It does, Davidson assured her. No one is questioning your integrity. But business is perception, and right now the Blackwood name is toxic. This was an unexpected twist. Juniper had built her revenge plan on the assumption that she would rise professionally as her family fell, that her success would be the mirror image of their failure. She hadn't considered that their disgrace might taint her by association regardless of her innocence. That evening, as she sat alone in her luxury apartment overlooking Central Park, Juniper received a call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered, "Juniper Blackwood. Miss Blackwood, this is Special Agent Carter with the FBI. We'd like to schedule an interview regarding your knowledge of Blackwood Financial's operations during the period you worked there." Juniper's stomach dropped. "I haven't worked at Blackwood Financial for over 3 years, Agent Carter, and my position there was entry-level with no access to the accounts in question. Nevertheless, as a family member and former employee, your insights could be valuable to our investigation. This can be entirely voluntary, or we can make it more formal." The implication was clear. After scheduling a meeting for the following day, Juniper poured herself a generous glass of wine and tried to calm her racing thoughts. This wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to be watching her family's downfall from a safe distance, not being drawn into the vortex herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Violet. "FBI interviewed me today." "I'm scared, Junie. Please call." Juniper hesitated. Her relationship with Violet had always been complicated. While her younger sister had participated in the family's dismissive treatment of her, Violet had also been a product of their parents' toxic influence, molded by Eleanor's superficiality and Richard's domineering nature. Unlike Maxwell, who had actively chosen cruelty, Violet had simply followed the path of least resistance. With a sigh, Juniper called her sister. Junie. Violet answered immediately, her voice thick with tears. "It's awful. They asked me all these questions about Dad's meetings and Max's investment strategies as if I paid any attention to that stuff. You know, I was just there for the family name and the trust fund." "What did you tell them?" Juniper asked. "Nothing useful, apparently." "They got really frustrated." Violet sniffled. "The apartment you got for Mom is so small, Junie? And she's making me share a bedroom with her because she says she can't sleep alone now. It's like a nightmare." Despite everything, Juniper felt a twinge of sympathy for her sister. Violet, for all her faults, had been as much a victim of their parents' warped values as she had been. "Listen, Vi," Juniper said gently. "The FBI is going to interview me tomorrow. I can't fix this situation, but maybe I can help you navigate it. Meet me for breakfast before my appointment and we'll talk strategy." The next morning, at a quiet cafe far from their usual haunts, Juniper found herself giving advice to the sister who had once mocked her sensitivity. "Tell them exactly what you know, nothing more and nothing less," she advised. "Don't try to protect Dad or Maxwell. They made their choices." Violet nodded, looking smaller and more vulnerable than Juniper had ever seen her. "Do you think they'll go to prison? For real?" "Yes," Juniper said honestly. "The evidence is overwhelming. They defrauded clients of millions of dollars." Tears welled in Violet's eyes. "I know they weren't always nice to you, especially that night at dinner. What Dad said was horrible. But they're still our parents, Junie. Doesn't that count for something?" It was the first time any member of her family had acknowledged the cruelty of that night without being prompted or pressured. The simple validation from her sister touched something in Juniper that she thought had hardened beyond reach. "It counts," she admitted quietly. "But it doesn't erase what they did to me or to their clients." As Juniper prepared to leave for her FBI interview, Violet grabbed her hand across the table. "Thank you for not abandoning me, even though you had every reason to. I don't know what I'd do without you right now." Walking to the federal building, Juniper realized that her revenge had spiraled into something far more complex than she had envisioned. The satisfaction she had anticipated was now mixed with unexpected complications, unwanted attention, and complicated emotions. The FBI interview lasted 4 grueling hours. Special Agent Carter was thorough, methodical, and occasionally skeptical of Juniper's insistence that she had no knowledge of the fraudulent activities at Blackwood Financial. You expect me to believe that someone with dual degrees in finance and economics didn't notice the irregularities in her family's business? Agent Carter asked, reviewing Juniper's educational credentials. I noticed that my father and brother made questionable business decisions. Juniper replied carefully. That's partly why I chose to work elsewhere. But I had no specific knowledge of fraudulent activities until the investigation became public. Yet you warned several major clients to withdraw their investments months before the firm collapsed, Carter noted, sliding a folder across the table. We have records of meetings between you and the Hendersons, the Winthrops, and Harold Winters, all of whom pulled substantial assets from Blackwood Financial after speaking with you. Juniper felt her pulse quicken but maintained her composure. I advised those clients based on legitimate investment strategies. I suggested diversification and more progressive approaches than Blackwood was offering. That's not illegal, it's competitive business. But convenient timing, Carter remarked. After the interview concluded, with no formal accusations, Juniper sat on a bench outside the federal building trying to collect her thoughts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Davidson. Board meeting moved up. Decision made. Call me. With trembling fingers, Juniper called her boss. The board has decided that a sabbatical is no longer optional, Davidson said without preamble. The FBI interview changes things, Juniper. We need distance until this resolves. Thomas, I didn't do anything wrong, Juniper insisted. The FBI has no evidence against me because none exists. It's not about evidence, it's about appearances. We're putting you on paid leave, effective immediately. 6 months, possibly longer, depending on how the case develops. Juniper felt her carefully constructed world begin to unravel. First her family, now her career. The revenge she had orchestrated was somehow rebounding to harm her own interests. That evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, Juniper received another unexpected call from her father, using his one phone call from detention. Junie Richards' voice sounded hollow, diminished. They're offering a plea deal. 20 years for me, 15 for Maxwell. If we don't take it, they're threatening to investigate everyone connected to the firm, including you and Violet. Juniper felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Are you threatening me, Dad? Even now? No. The word came out as a tired sigh. I'm asking for your help one last time. Not money, not legal defense, just the truth. What truth? Tell the prosecutors what you know about our legitimate business dealings. Testify that while we may have made mistakes, the core of the business was sound. You were there, Juniper. You know not everything we did was corrupt. The request stunned her. After all this time, her father was finally acknowledging her expertise, her knowledge of the business only now when he needed something from her. Why would I do that? She asked quietly. After everything you've said and done, there was a long pause before Richard replied, his voice uncharacteristically humble. Because despite what I said that night, you are a Blackwood. And because I was wrong about you, Juniper. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I realize now that you were always the most capable of my children, the most principled. I was threatened by that, by your independence. It was easier to dismiss you than to admit that you might be right. Juniper felt tears spring to her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. After years of craving her father's approval and recognition here, it was offered from a jail cell when it was too late to matter. I can't lie for you, Dad, she said finally. But I can speak to what I know was legitimate. That's all. That's all I'm asking, Richard replied, sounding relieved. And Juniper, I'm sorry. For that night, and for all the nights before it, when I failed to see your value. Your mother and I, we were wrong. After the call ended, Juniper sat in stunned silence. The apology she had demanded from her mother had been forced extracted through leverage and desperation. But her father's apology felt genuine, a product of reflection rather than coercion. It changed nothing about the past, but somehow it shifted something in her present. The next day, Juniper met with the federal prosecutors handling the Blackwood case. She provided a nuanced testimony, neither excusing her family's crimes nor exaggerating them. She spoke honestly about the legitimate aspects of the business she had observed, while making clear that she had no knowledge of the fraudulent activities. "Your statement may help contextualize some aspects of the case," the lead prosecutor told her. "But your father and brother are still facing substantial prison time. The evidence of fraud is overwhelming." "I understand," Juniper replied. "I'm not here to save them from consequences, just to ensure that the truth, the whole truth, is considered." As she left the prosecutor's office, Juniper realized something unexpected. The cold satisfaction she had anticipated feeling at her family's downfall had been replaced by something more complex, a mixture of sadness for what could have been relief at finally being acknowledged, and a strange sense of peace that came with speaking her truth without agenda. Her revenge had succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. Blackwood Financial was destroyed. Her parents and brother were facing the consequences of their actions. She had proven her worth in the most dramatic way possible. Yet the victory felt hollow, tainted by the collateral damage to her own career and the complicated emotions stirred by her father's belated recognition. That night, as Juniper considered her next steps, she received a surprising email from Harold Winters, the billionaire who had been one of her first private clients. "I'm hearing troubling things about your situation at Davidson," he wrote. "They're fools to sideline their best strategist because of your family name. I have a proposition for you. My tech ventures need a dedicated financial division with someone I trust at the helm. Build it for me. Full autonomy, substantial backing, and a clean slate. The Blackwood name still means something to me because of you, not despite you." For the first time in weeks, Juniper felt a genuine smile form. Perhaps there was a way forward after all, not defined by revenge or family legacy, but by her own merits and the relationships she had built through integrity. 5 years later, Juniper Blackwood stepped onto the podium at the Financial Women's Association annual awards dinner, accepting the Entrepreneur of the Year award for the remarkable success of Phoenix Financial Partners, the firm she had built from scratch with Harold Winters' initial backing. "Thank you for this honor," she began, surveying the room filled with the industry's elite. "When I started this journey, I was driven by a need to prove myself, to show that I was more than just a name, more than someone's daughter or sister. Today, I stand before you having learned that true success isn't about proving others wrong, but about proving yourself right." In the front row, Violet applauded enthusiastically. After the Blackwood scandal, she had surprised everyone, perhaps most of all herself, by returning to school and earning a degree in social work. Now she counseled families dealing with financial trauma and identity crises, turning her own painful experiences into wisdom for others. Eleanor sat beside her daughter, more subdued but present. The humbling experience of losing everything had transformed her from a society matron into a more authentic person. She volunteered at the Women's Business Center Juniper had founded, teaching etiquette and networking skills to young professionals, channeling her social expertise into something genuinely helpful. Richard and Maxwell were still serving their sentences, though Richard's had been reduced for cooperation. Juniper visited her father monthly, their relationship slowly rebuilding on more honest foundations. Maxwell had refused all contact, still blaming Juniper for not saving him from consequences. "The greatest lesson I've learned," Juniper continued in her speech, "is that true justice isn't about revenge, but about restoration. About creating something better from the ashes of disappointment and betrayal." We all face moments when we're told we're not enough, not liked, not valued, not respected. The challenge isn't to prove those voices wrong, but to find our own voice that speaks a better truth. As applause filled the room, Juniper felt a sense of completion. The wounded young woman who had sat at that fateful dinner table, absorbing her father's cruel words, had transformed her pain into purpose. The empire she had built wasn't founded on the rubble of her family's downfall, but on the strength she had discovered within herself along the way. Sometimes she reflected the most satisfying revenge wasn't about destroying others, but about building yourself into someone they can't ignore, someone who no longer needs their approval to know her own worth. The ultimate victory wasn't watching her family fall. It was rising so high that they had to look up to see her. What would you do if your family betrayed you like Juniper's did? Have you ever experienced a moment where family karma came back around in your own life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this family revenge tale resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about justice and personal transformation. Thanks for staying with me through Juniper's journey. Sometimes the best revenge truly is living well. Share this with someone who needs to hear that success is the sweetest revenge.